Good evening, thrill seekers and horror enthusiasts. Welcome back to SL Tonight, where we dive into the darkest corners of storytelling, right here from Cedar Rapids. Before we begin, we have another sponsor. Hopefully this time it's a good one.
FBI in the ring, disease on the rise. Karen's demanding time to improvise. Rap with a Karen everywhere, entitled punches, but I don't care. Masked off manager, please two boy quick. One hook right, and the scene. Karen knockout, punch that crowd. FBI sweet, take her down. Wrath of the Karen, ring the bell. 1-2 combo, send her. Research, all night fight, Karen boss with a wine glass shield. Uppercut time, make her yield. Lawful chaos, ancient evil brew. But first, the Karens, knock 'em through. Karen knockout, wrath no more. FBI wins, score the score. Karen knockout, round and round. Knockout, knockout, knockout.
Well, would you look at that? I got the right tape this time. And that, folks, is Wrath of the Karens, Knockout 2, or Knockout 2 Wrath of the Karens by Exceptional Games. Coming soon to a Steam page near you. Get it wishlisted now, while you still can, because Lord knows it's going to be selling like hotcakes. I mean, did you see that footage? That actually looked pretty good. Alright. Let's get to tonight's story. Tonight we're cracking open C. Robert Cargill's chilling collection, We Are Where the Nightmares Go, and Other Stories. For a tale that's equal parts prehistoric terror An undead nightmare. Imagine surviving the end of the world only to face something far worse. Zombie dinosaurs roaming a scorched earth. That's Hell Creek, a brutal emotional ride featuring a plucky triceratops teaming up with an ankylosaurus in a post-asteroid apocalypse. No spoilers, but buckle up. This one's got heart, core, and some serious dino action. Let's get into it. 65 million years ago, the creeping death came like ghosts in the night sky. Comets like stars with smears for tails, thousands of them appeared all at once. Spirits of some ancient brontosaurus herd migrating from one side of the sky to the other. For weeks they loomed, every night growing ever larger, the smears swelling into brushstrokes, the brushstrokes swelling into rivers, until at last they arrived. And when the creeping death came down to earth, it came with the fire and the fury and the thunder and the anger and the might and the wind and the lightning and the rumble and the roar of 100,000 storms at once. The spirits were angry, streaked down, their tails glowing as bright as the sun, growing puffy and black as long as the sky itself. And when they slammed headlong into the sea, they growed blighter than still, raining hell from the other side of the world. Chaos. The whole world fell into chaos. Heat blasted the land so that beasts boiled inside their skins. Dust storms rent flesh from bones. Molten rock pelted down from the heavens. The earth shook so violently that every upright living thing was knocked clean on its side. Tsunamis 300 meters high carved new mountains and dragged millions of limp, broken creatures back out to sea. But that wasn't the worst of it. That was just the announcement. Preamble, a brutal wiping out of generations before settling in to wipe out the rest. Shards of a forgotten world, long since spun out of its orbit, frozen and fractured, slammed into the ocean, vaporizing instantly with millions of tons of water, vast eruptions of steam thrust into the atmosphere, the sea boiling, belching out 1,000,000 tons of angry hate. While the days that followed were a nightmare only a handful of beasts would survive, it would be neither the heat, nor the fire, nor the stone, nor the quakes, nor the poison gas, nor the volcanic eruptions that would ultimately do them in. It'd be something far, far worse. Because once the earth had settled and the seas receded and the skies stopped spewing fire, the rains came. And those rains brought with them the end of the world. The creeping death. Triceratops was hungry, starving, but she dared not leave the safety of her cave. Not yet. She could still hear the crackling of the searing forest fires burning away acres of food just outside. The air was cooler in here, fresher in here, and she wouldn't be burned alive, not like the others. She tried not to think about them. Her herd had been small, but kind, and she didn't want to think about how she last saw them, their eyes wide, their legs scrambling for footing before the side of the hill shifted, sending them plummeting down into the fires below. The sound of their screams still lingered in her thoughts. She deserved better than that. She'd seen Quetzalcoatlus, the giant pterodactyl scavengers of the sky, fall from the air, flailing their charred black wings pockmarked by burning debris. Their shrill screams were mighty, but at least they died instantly, splattering against the ground. They weren't roasted, writhing, begging her to help them up. That was the truly awful part. At first the thunder was far off, sporadic rumbles trailing into the cave, but the sound grew. The tremors sharpened, billows deepened, and it was clear that this wasn't a storm of the earth, but an even more terrible one in the sky. By the time the rains reached the cave, the thunder shook its walls, reverberated through the ground, blasted and cracked with tumultuous echo. It had never rained so hard in all her life. The skies were scrubbed clean the earth of all the hate that had preceded it. It wanted to wash away the fires, smooth out the hillsides, fill in rough new gaps with rivers and ponds. The sound was deafening. The rains, a brace of static almost as loud as its thunder. Water pooled at the base of the upward slope into the yawning maw of the cave, growing at a rate that worried Triceratops, who feared she might soon become trapped in its narrow throat. She poked her head down the passage, out towards the light, sniffing. Nothing coming. She shuffled closer, nearing the opening. It was dark out. Not night dark, but darker than she'd ever seen a storm. The clouds above swelled black and pendulous, the rain so thick it softened into a fog, and she could see little past the mouth of the cave. There was only one thing of which she could be certain. The fires were out. Now she waited again. It was time for the storm to pass. There was no telling how long it would take, so she settled down, rolling into a ball in the far back corner of her shelter, falling into a shallow, troubled, nightmare-ridden sleep. Horns thrashing, orange and purple flesh broiling a deep black into the smoky pits below. Smell of cooking meat wafting upward. Hollow, shrill screams. Help! 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 Kinds of cries heard only from unfortunate prey, still breathing, graying, feasted upon by larger beasts. Birds walking through fire, millions of them, flesh dripping from their corpses, their bellies hollowed out, carbonized skeletons shambling through smoke. Trees burned like matches, smoldering slowly from the tops down. The thunder cracked so loud that everything shook, knocking loose dirt and rock from the ceiling, walls. Triceratops shivered, still trembling from the dream, wrestling to sleep against the crisp images that lingered. No sooner had her eyes closed than she was once again in the fields, grazing on tall grasses and sweet menthy leaves. Her herd surrounded her, back from the dead, delighting in the fruit and greenery of the wide open expanse. It was safe here. Could see for a mile out. Nowhere to sneak up from. There's a place to run, several more places to hold your ground, standing with the herd. Safety was a rarity out here, but they'd found it. The flash, brightening the sky, blinding to look at, lighting the whole world like it had emerged from the blackest cave into the noonday sun. Couldn't see anything more than a smudge of green and white. She could hear the herd flailing and stamping, feel the fear washing over them. A second flash. Lightning, so close that it lit inside the cave. There hadn't been a second flash, it was only the storm. The cave still snarling with the sound of its thunder. The rain still pounded, lightning flickering through the insides of the clouds. It seemed that this would never end. She listened, and waited, and then the rain thinned. Static became staccato, then the staccato became patter. Then it stopped entirely, ending with a faint, listless drizzle evaporating into nothing. The storm had finally rained itself out. She staggered to the mouth of the cave, dropping her head into the largest puddle, lapping up fresh rainwater. It was sweet, refreshing, but her stomach groaned, sloshing, empty, aching for something solid. The rain had chased away the fires, but not the smoky, charred odor of ruin. There was no food on the air. She daydreamed of blossoming trees, the honeyed leaves calling to her, her stomach growling ferociously now, loud enough that other animals, had any been nearby, could hear it. She took a tender, careful step out of the cave, pawing at the earth a few times to make sure it wasn't too slick to bear her weight, and then another awkward step, and then another. Soon she was completely out of the cave, treading on soft, muddy, but stable ground. Triceratops made her way down the hill, then moved quickly to the smoldering tree line, the forest so thick with lingering smoke that she couldn't see more than a few leaps in front of her. But she didn't stop, her feet still carrying her forward, pressing on through the forest, her ravenous hunger drawing her ever deeper in search of something to eat. She walked for nearly a mile before arriving at a large, blooming copse of ripe fern trees, their leaves glistening, drooping low with the weight of rainwater. While patches of forest around them had burned, this little thicket remained untouched, a feast that could last for days if nothing else found them. She bit off the lowest leaf, chewing and swallowing quickly, barely able to savor it. There was little doubt in her mind that this was the greatest meal of her life. Hungrily she attacked the tree, tearing away leaf after leaf until her stomach finally began to relax, her pace becoming more leisurely. This was a meal. Triceratops thought of the others and wished she could share it with them, and it was only then that it really began to sink in that they were gone. She would never see them again. She had no herd, alone. She missed them. She would never again be swarmed by the spring calves, never again huddle in a pile for warmth against the sudden chill, never again bray or prance for the attention of the bulls, never again. And then another thought tiptoed slowly through the sad ones, creeping into the back of her mind. She was alone. There was no one else to protect her. No one to look out while she ate. No one to call warning. There was something was watching her now. Watching her eat. Waiting to pounce. She stopped chewing and listened to the forest, her eyes now wide with fear. Mouth agape, mid-chew. The earth was silent, dead, devoid of all life. Nothing chirped or hummed or cried or gnawed. Not insects, nor the tiny mammals burrowing below. And after a day of roars and quakes, the quiet seemed all the more eerie and dreamlike. It wasn't supposed to be this way. It was never this way. As Triceratops thought back, she couldn't recall a single minute of silence since the teeming life of the forest. Even during moments of sheer panic, when beasts several times their size crashed through nearby hills, she could still hear the hot breath of her companions and the flapping wings of claustrophobic taken through the air. This was different. This was wrong. Then she heard something, distant at first, the sound of rustling foliage being crushed underfoot, branches and saplings snapping against lumbering weight. Then came the scraping of flesh upon the earth, the grinding of a dragging limb, and the thump of its overworked sibling. Drag, thump. Drag, thump. Drag, thump. Whatever it was still a ways off, slow, wounded. As long as she kept a safe distance, it couldn't cover that ground fast enough to catch her. Triceratops sniffed. Death. Something reeked of rot, of boiled insides and meat smoked in bubbling tar. Scent wafted in with the sound, the air now drenched with it. For a moment she wondered if she'd stumbled downwind of her own herd's demise. But there were no corpses, no layers of bodies liquefying in the sopping earth. Something had died here, something else had since dragged it away, but not so long enough ago that its death didn't still linger. Drag, thump. Drag, thump. Drag, thump. It was getting closer. She looked around and saw nothing nearby. So cautiously, with the lightest step as possible, she shuffled into a patch of bushes, forcing her head through the leaves to peek out the other side. There it was, emerging through the smoke, 30 yards away, Dinosaurs. Left leg broken, reddish-brown side torn apart, gouged out with tremendous bite marks, its inside spilling from the wound, intestines trailing on the ground behind it. Tail was fractured in 3 places, twitching and jerking stiffly as it moved, bones protruding in places. Its eyes were already glazed over, milky white. It was a mystery how it even managed to stay erect, leg mangled as it was. This king of the beasts, this mighty monster of its day, would soon fall over dead. In fact, it appeared mere footsteps away from doing so. And yet nothing deterred its pace. One good leg thumping forward, broken limbs shuffling bloody behind. Its wounds were great, but no longer oozed or bled. Stranger still, it did not cry out or wince at its injury. The Tyrannosaurus pressed onward, recognizing neither fear nor pain, till it snapped, and it sniffed, and its head turned towards Triceratops. Then it let out a dull moan, half a growl concealed under exhaled breath, and it began to limp once more, this time straight towards her. Triceratops bolted. Her large bony neck furled tearing leaves from the branches as she turned, the forest shuddering as she galloped through it. Thump, drag, speedily pursuing behind her. She needed to get back to the cave. The entrance was narrow, tight enough to have a fair fight and perhaps even constrictive enough to keep the giant tyrannosaur out. But it was a ways off still. She had to run, harder than she'd ever had, uphill, through slick mud left behind after the rain. She was lucky the beast would die from its wounds long before it reached her. but it pursued her still, though the sound of thumping and dragging grew weaker with each passing second, drifting behind her as she gained a substantial lead. There it was, the path up the hill. She galloped faster, giving it her last few ounces of reserve energy, his strength, buying her the time she needed to make it up the slope. Then her feet hit the mud of the hill and she slid, slamming face first into the dirt, her chin dragging 6 inches in. She scrambled to her feet, but her legs kept pumping, slipping in the mud. For a moment she thought of her herd, losing their footing before falling into the fire. How they had died. She would die screaming, like them. Triceratops breathed deep, closing her eyes, tightening her muscles. She took a single measured step, finding her footing, then following, found another. Her feet sank into the mud, giving her just enough traction to continue. Step, step, step. Deadfalls snapped in the forest behind her, leaves rustling, the broken limb and fractured tail dragged limply through them. Step, step, step. She trudged sullenly up the hill, heart racing, sure she was moments away from death. But she couldn't move faster. Any more quickly up the hill and she would lose her footing, slowly sliding back down into the waiting maw of a broken beast. It was almost on her, and she was but halfway up the hill. She could hear it. But she didn't have the time to turn around and look. Three splintered, one cracking in half, slamming down in the mud no more than 20 feet beside her. It was here. Step, step, step. The beast moaned once more, jaws snapping open and shut. A smell of death flooded the air. Triceratops had only seconds left to make it to the top. She struggled, her legs caked in mud, her muscles rigid and tense, her balance fading. Just a few more steps. Then came the wet smack of several tons of Tyrannosaurus flopping in the mud. Triceratops turned. She couldn't keep herself from looking away any longer. There, several lengths behind her at the base of the hill, flailed the angry, half-dead creature, its jaw snapping futilely, its short, stubby arms clawing in vain to set itself upright. It would never stand again. His leg was now not only broken but twisted nearly off, the other buried a foot deep in mire. And yet the thing would not die. It did not seem to notice its grievous wounds or inability to stand on its own 2 feet. It knew only hunger and continued to shift its mass back and forth through the muck, never gaining an inch up the hill it didn't immediately feed back. Triceratops sighed, relieved, turned back toward the hilltop and her steady, methodical climb, ever the more aware that a single slip could mean the end of her. Took another step, and then another. Soon she reached the crest of the hill, where it leveled off and led to the mouth of the cave. She sniffed. There was something in the air. Something else. Looking back over her shoulder, she watched as the upended Tyrannosaurus writhed on its back, batting at the air. It wasn't going anywhere anytime soon. Now there was another threat. Something was on the hilltop with her. She gazed at the ground, fresh tracks. Something not so large as her, but still big enough to be dangerous, had climbed up in her absence and made its way into the cave. Now she suffered a terrible choice. The hill offered no other way in, up or down. Along its sides were steep stone walls. She would never survive the drop-off. It was what had claimed her cave was a threat. She had nowhere to run. Her only choice now was either face the narrow base of the hill and the dying Tyrannosaurus waiting there, or into the cave, taking her chances. She stared at the cave's yawning entrance, hoping the interloper might show itself. It did not. Cautiously she sniffed the tracks, but the strong smell of wet earth overpowered whatever it left behind. And then from her right, over the cliffside from the timberland below, came a terrible howl. Another Tyrannosaur, upright, angry, and very much unhurt, staring up at her. He too had survived the day unscathed and appeared to be starving. He gazed up, drooling, teeth bared, trying to figure out how best to scale the hill. From his vantage point he could see neither the path up nor the flopping mess of a cousin laying at its foot. Pacing back and forth, he shifted his weight from one leg to the other in a strange dance, trying to find a way up without losing sight of his prey. It let out another shrill cry, this one sounding more frustrated than angry. Triceratops stood her ground, trying her best not to look terrified. The Tyrannosaur sensed her fears. It would only try harder to get to her. But if she could stare it down long enough, the advantage of being on high ground might convince it to find dinner elsewhere. Then something caught her eye, whistling at treetops well beyond him, perhaps 100 yards off. While many of the trees in the forest were redwoods hundreds of feet tall, the canopy of conifers in this section mostly rested below the threshold of the hilltop, and few had been spared the full wrath of the firestorm. She was looking out over the miles of black patches, dipping into a valley where the redwoods once thrived and shot through the heavens, their canopy hundreds of feet high. Now most stood like black thorns poking through choking miasma, smoke still billowing in places. But something tore beneath it with alarming speed, swaying branches and boughs, skimming just below the surface of the fog. The rippling weight trailed behind. The Tyrannosaur wobbled, swaying with menace, unaware of the threat looming behind him. Triceratops' heart raced. 20 yards out, the Tyrannosaur heard it. He perked up, looking around, slowly spinning himself to face whatever was behind him, no longer interested in Triceratops. Rearing up on his hind legs, flicking his tail menacingly, he leaned forward, roaring into the soot and mist. She had never been this close to a Tyrannosaur before. Not a live one. Not one that wasn't already twisted and broken and waiting to die. Triceratops pissed herself standing there, the roar freezing her in place. If something was to emerge from the mouth of the cave or make its way up the hillside behind her, there was little chance of her noticing it. The Tyrannosaur and its mysterious pursuer had her undivided attention. Trees splintered, branches snapped, and 3 Tyrannosauruses emerged from the trees. They were trembling with the sound of their stampeding feet. Each was mauled, broken, wounded in their own way, and all 3 depended on their lone brethren, caring not of what that they were in any way related. The biggest, One Eye, towered a full head over the others, a large, jagged scar running from the top of his crimson head through an empty, gouged-out eye socket, healed over years ago, down to his chin. His claws and teeth were huge, chipped from countless fights, his mouth swimming in nicks and scars from eating things that had still struggled while he chewed. His hide was the color of fresh blood, his talons coal black, his single milky eye standing out in the dark pallor. The other 2, Stump and Cavity, clearly brothers, were smaller, squat, and brown, their frames hulking, shoulders broad, making them slightly wider than One Eye despite being nowhere near as tall. Stump was armless, both tiny appendages having been chewed off all the way to ball joints, while Cavity was covered in small bites, his entire lower abdomen hollowed out, devoured whole by an army of smaller creatures. They surged forward, eyes dead, mouths wide and snarling. The land Tyrannosaur managed a single bite on an attacker, his open jaw clamping down on Cavity's neck, his teeth digging in deep before tearing at its throat. It'd be his last and only act of defiance as 3 powerful jaws rent him to pieces where he stood. His legs hit the ground, but his torso remained aloft, being torn asunder in a huge tug-of-war between 3 desperate mouths, before splattering apart in a shower of gore. Cavity managed to claim a large chunk of his own, whipping his head back and swallowing the mass whole. But it slid right out the gaping hole in his throat, the wound not bothering him at all, and he turned back to the remaining bits of his prey, only to see the piece that just slipped out, attacking again as if it were new. He continued this sad ballet, swallowing and losing the hunk of meat before snapping it back up again, whilst One Eye and Stump consumed the remainder of their meat in an orgiast feast of gushing blood, each of them unaware that they were being watched. Smell hit her. Triceratops breathed in a sour scent of the age-old dead, and she began to understand. She turned around slowly and looked down at the foot of the hill. Mauled and broken though it was, the first Tyrannosaur still thrashed in the mud, no further up the hill than it was when the last she looked. Things would not die, they would not succumb to their wounds, and they would not stop coming for her. She needed to get in that cave before they saw her, no matter what waited for her there. It had no smell of death. Whatever was inside was still alive, and that meant she at least had a chance to kill it. Triceratops steadied his nerve and strode boldly into the cave. her expression stoic, her head low, horns pointed down to scare anything that might think about coming at her. Inside the cave it was dark, her immense body blocking most of the light streaming in through the narrow mouth behind her. Whatever was in there would know she was coming. It was dank, shadowy. What had only moments before been a warm comfort now seemed black, cold, terrifying. Slowly she made her way down the passage, creeping with the light a foot as she could. When reaching the opening into the wider cave, she saw it. A shadow. Smaller than her, but still threatening enough. It was more like moving mound of bristling darkness than anything else, scuffling against the back wall of the cave. She moved her bulk from the light, letting in just enough to illuminate the silhouette. It was an ankylosaurus, with a tiny triangular head sporting two devil spurs from its temples above its black, whiteless eyes, with two more spurs further back, jutting from behind the hinge in its jaw. From its neck backward he was armored, covered in a rippled mass of brown, bony plates, each terminating in large, dull, tan pyramidal spurs that danced when the creature moved. He waddled as he walked, slow, lumbering, its yellow-brown legs just strong enough to support its own weight. And behind him dragged his tail, also armored as well, ending in a massive white club of bone that could split a skull in two with a single powerful swing. Ankylosaurus shuffled about, his tail raised up behind him like a scorpion, the bone both broad and menacing, ready to come down. He stamped his feet, snorting, and struck the cave floor twice with his tail. Strikes were fast, almost too fast to see, sand erupting, showering Triceratops. This beast meant business, but it was an herbivore. Teeth were as dull as hers, mouth too small to even get a grip of her flesh. Triceratops knew this Ankylosaurus was every bit as scared as she, so she stepped lightly, pointing her horns at the ceiling. He sniffed the air, checking to see if he was alive, or dead, more for sure than anything else. Ankylosaurus narrowed his eyes a little, lowered his head, eased back his tail, but keeping it raised at an angle just in case. He took a cautious step toward her and sniffed as well. Then he took another step, smelling deeper and harder this time. They crept slowly toward each other, investigating, each hoping their company was no real threat at all. In the wild, before the thunder and the fire and the rain and the quakes, these beasts wouldn't give the other second thought. They'd eat from the same tree, chewing off adjacent leaves and never doing more than shoving the other out of the way. Here, now, things were different. Something had changed. For a moment, each held out hope. Then Ankylosaurus stepped back, tossing his head with a snort, patting a little dance with his feet. He quickly shuffled the sand around, dropping onto it, making himself a cozy nest, curling his tail around to touch his nose. He didn't care about Triceratops being in the cave at all, as long as she left him alone. Triceratops snorted as well, shuffling under her breath before making her way past him, deeper into the cave to the spot where she'd nested before, leaving Ankylosaurus between her and the cave mouth. Curled up on the floor, her head, more important, her horns, facing the mouth of the cave. She lay there, eyes trained on the mouth of the cave, waiting. 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 Eyelids fluttering, consciousness faded so slowly she barely noticed. The roar was a hurricane gale of rotten, fetid wind belched out from the maggot-swollen belly of a barely standing beast. Their sanctuary was a secret no more. The passage out had darkened, light trickling in through a few narrow spaces not blocked by the approaching predator. Triceratops had no idea how long she'd been out, but it was clearly long enough for the monsters to have tracked them down. She was groggy, tried to shake the sleep from her head, whipping her snout back and forth. The beast roared again, its stench beginning to fill the cave. Ankylosaurus anxiously looked back at Triceratops, his eyes narrow, body trembling, tail swinging combatively back and forth. He had the room to engage the Tyrannosaurus if he had to, but just barely. Stepping back a few paces, he hunched his body forward, tail raised in the air. Then he nodded towards the far corner of the cave, eyes still trained on her. He knew what he meant. She skulked quietly to the far side of the cave, a dark corner that put her squarely in line of anything that might emerge from the passage. There she set the charge, her muscles tense, head down, horns pointed at the corridor. Her breathing became fevered, Short, tight breaths like whip cracks, driving our heartbeat ever faster. The thing roared again, clearly stuck in the passage, scraping against the rock walls. It howled, but not in pain, only in anger. This was something that knew no pity, felt no fear. It had to be one of the shambling broken dead. No other creature would push so hard through so narrow a cave, bellowing angrily all the while. The head emerged, freeing its bulk from the tight enclosure. Its massive, fatty body stumbling as its distended stomach was now finally pulling through the tunnel and into the cavern. It was Stump, the armless Tyrannosaurus, or what was left of him. The tortuous passage along the rock walls had scraped off layers of his clammy, festering skin. His hide was shredded, an oozing, pus-drenched mess. Stump staggered farther in, teetering to regain his balance before falling face first onto the ground. He hit the sand with a titanic whoop, his jaw shattering against the rock floor. The hit shook loose any connection between his brain and his body, and he stared, milky-eyed, at the wall, duped. Then he snorted, sniffed the air, smelling the fresh herbivore just miles away, at once coming back to life. Scrambling to his feet, he burst upright. His mangled jaw dangled limply, jagged teeth dripping blood, his exposed muscles now covering the coarse sand. He roared again, this time mightier and hungrier than he had roared before. Ankylosaurus swinging his colossal club-like tail, his body swiveling around on four stubby little legs. The blow struck Stump square in the chest, sound of splattering meat and splintering bone like a crack of thunder in the tiny echoing chamber. Stump reeled from the force of the hit, but was otherwise entirely unfazed. Stump took a single measured step towards Ankylosaurus, ignoring the dented cavity in his chest pooling with blood. Then he took another, and another. Ankylosaurus shuffled backward until he could shuffle no more. The bone spurs of his back pressed up against the cave wall, tail left with just enough room to take one more shallow stroke. He looked over at Triceratops, eyes pleading. Triceratops, frozen in fear, stood agape at the monstrosity before her. There it was, flesh peeled away, chest caved in from a terrible blow, arms knotted completely off, jaw destroyed, and still it hungered. Still it stood, still it moved, refusing to give up, lurching towards Ankylosaurus. There was only one thing left for her to do. Charged, head down, muscles pushing harder than they ever had. She slammed into Stump at full speed, horns goring him in the side, picking him up off his feet, battering him into the wall. The creature shattered and splattered between Triceratops and the solid rock. She flicked her head to the side, her horns tearing their way out through the predator's stomach. Stump groaned, trying to work his legs. He flailed, lashing out at Triceratops with his upper jaw, his lower jaw dangling uselessly. Triceratops bucked away, taking a dozen steps backwards all at once in a terrified shuffle. She'd given it everything she had. She felt like she could have knocked a brontosaurus on its side with that hit, and yet Stump still moved, still snapped, still shambled toward her. Ankylosaurus brought down his tail with a terrible thwack, the bone mallet crushing Stamp's skull into powder, following through, driving the Tyrannosaurus right into the dirt. Brains and bones splashed, spraying the cave. Stump lay belly down on the earth, its beaten, ravaged body finally still, a crater of pulpy slop where its head used to be. Triceratops and Ankylosaurus shared a bewildered look of relief, both leaning in to sniff the crater. This thing was dead, and it wasn't getting back up. They shared another look. The head. You had to aim for the head. Ankylosaurus approached Triceratops slowly, head down, tail dragging. He nuzzled her lightly with his head along her gore-splattered neck frill and under her chin. He knew what he meant and nuzzled back, friendly, but not too friendly. They weren't out of danger yet. Stump's stomach burst, spilling out its half-digested contents. Chunks of flesh, bone, teeth, talons, feathers, and the chewed-off heads of smaller dinosaurs, all pasted together in a molten slag oozing out onto the cave floor. Glory admitted a stench so foul that it blistered the chalk off the cave walls, wilting both Triceratops and Ankylosaurus. Every instinct told Triceratops that leaving the cave meant certain death. Her eyes watered, her insides heaved, her head swam from the rotten scent. She had to get out. Ankylosaurus had to get out. Together they bolted for the fresh air, no longer carrying what weighted with it. Outside, the fresh air was intoxicating, deliriously fresh. Triceratops and Ankylosaurus cleared their nostrils, breathed in lungs full of clean, clear air. The refreshment was so overwhelming that it took a few seconds for them to register the shuddering earth and the gurgling mess of another monster stampeding straight for them. Cavity, his festering innards dangling from the gnawed hole in his abdomen, one end of his intestines dragged on the ground behind him. He thundered across the top of the hill, pinwheeling arms clawing at them. Ankylosaurus reacted without thinking, swinging his mighty tail, but his body skidded in the mud and he missed Cavity's head entirely, instead sweeping his legs right out from under him. Bones in Cavity's legs shattered, and he dropped with a tremendous slap to the fresh, wet earth. Now Triceratops' instincts kicked in. He pounced, throwing all her body weight into a single headbutt. The horn struck true, sinking right into Cavity's eye socket, on into the brain, its force so great that it pierced through the skull on the other side. Cavity seized up, every muscle spasming at once. Then the beast went limp, its struggling limbs flopping to its sides. Triceratops backed away, teasing her horn out of the skull, thick, vicious gore dripping off of it. He'd never killed before. He'd charged. He'd hit things. He'd wounded a handful of predators, convincing them to seek dinner elsewhere. He'd never killed anything. Never delivered a blow from which a thing couldn't stand back up. It felt good. Powerful. Great sense of relief overtook her. This could work. She and Ankylosaurus didn't have to hide from these things or run from them in sight. Sure, that might still be the best idea, but they didn't have to be afraid. Not are they dead. The dead they could kill again. They just had to be careful about it. Ankylosaurus looked at her proudly, then brought it down together. He felt safer now as well. He took a few steps boldly forward, following the trail down into the forest. Triceratops chuffed, stamping her feet. Ankylosaurus looked back, his whole body turning to see past his bulky dome of the back. She stamped her feet again and shook her head back and forth. Then she squatted, creeping low, making her way slowly towards the edge of the cliff. Ankylosaurus squawked, referring to her. He crept as low as he could as well, sensing her caution, following behind, wondering what she knew was down there. Triceratops peeked over the hilltop. Below, still writhing in the mud, was most of a Tyrannosaur. Ankylosaurus's eye went wide, his tiny brain trying to work out a way past his mud-covered feet. Seen Tyrannosaurus before. He'd never seen so many in one day. As bad as things were, they were steadily getting worse. The one-legged Tyrannosaur flopped back and forth like a beach fish. Occasionally it would work its one leg into a position and would slide up the hill a few feet, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not make any headway up the mud-slick path. But Triceratops knew there was only one remaining standing Tyrannosaur out there in the woods, One-Eye, and that the light would not be with them much longer. He also knew that there was no way off this hill other than past the mangled wreckage below. For despite its injuries, the one-legged Tyrannosaur could still destroy them, given the chance. There was no other choice. It was time to be daring. Ankylosaurus eyed her curiously, wondering what was on her mind. She pattered back as quietly as she could, stood up, steadying herself, and took a running charge down the trail. Ankylosaurus scurried out of the way, whimpering, eyes wide, wondering if she'd gone sick or crazy. Triceratops launched herself into the air over the side of the hill, pulled her legs in close, belly flopped onto the slick downhill slope. Then she roared down the hill at an incredible speed, shifting her mass as she went, horns pointed directly towards the head of the Tyrannosaur. The Tyrannosaur looked up, for a moment giving up on its struggle, cocking its head, confused to see a meal running right towards its mouth. It opened wide, hunger getting the best of it. The horn tore through its skull, popping it like an exploding dandelion, a shower of goo spraying Triceratops head to toe. Her momentum carrying her forward, pushing the horn deeper, carrying what remained of the head off the neck, plunging her further into its rotting chest. The beast's torso erupted, spraying rancid guts down the hillside. Triceratops broke free of the shredded corpse and came to a rest a few yards away. Stench covered every inch of Triceratops' body. Her nostrils burned, tears flooded her eyes. Water. She needed water. Ankylosaurus bounded down the hill as carefully as she could. excited. He'd never done anything like Triceratops before. Never seen anything like Triceratops before. He was amazing, indestructible, a Tyrannosaur killing machine. He'd been very lucky to have it upon her and wasn't letting her go anytime soon. He nuzzled again with his snout, thanking her. Triceratops nuzzled back, carefully trying not to smear Tyrannosaur goo on him. She pulled away, sniffing the air, searching for water, but smelled nothing but fetid fluids. Casting an inquiring eye at her companion, she bowed her head, as if she were drinking, and then sniffed the air again. Ankylosaur thought for a moment, and then turned, walking into the charred woods. She turned back around to see if she'd follow. She hesitated a moment, wondering if he really knew where he was going, then relented, plodding behind him, eyes cautiously scanning for any signs of life. There was nothing. The forest was as dead and quiet as it had been before. No footsteps, no insect hum, no bird song, no rustle of leaves. Nothing that sounded like the world they had once known. By the time they reached the lake, the sun had long set and the stars had wheeled out from the darkness. The sky was at war with itself, stars continued to streak down, some flaring as bright as daylight as they fell. Sometimes as many as half a dozen would fall at the same time. Meanwhile, the long tails of the brontosaurus spirits still hung in the sky, though they were smaller now, dwindling as they wandered away, having lost a handful on their way past. Across the crystal sheen of the still lake, the mirrored display was twice as amazing. The water was fresh here, though the surrounding forest had been burned away, leaving a charred hellscape peppered with soot. The lake, a yawning jaw with smoldering, splintering timber for teeth. Triceratops dunked her head beneath the surface, but only for a second. She couldn't hold her breath and had to time her dives with each exhale. Water grew pink around her, ichor sliding off her skin. Ankylosaurus drank deep, standing away to avoid the runoff from Triceratops. They hadn't seen anything else on their way here save for the charred husk of those caught in fire. Blackened, crisp, they hadn't budged at all. Only the freshly dead, still corpulent, seemed able to rise and walk, but the two kept their distance anyway. Ankylosaurus brayed, calling to his herd. He'd lost them as the flaming forest exploded around them. He'd been stranded with his mate on the other side of a raging wall of fire, but she'd been crushed beneath the weight of a falling tree soon after. He hadn't had time to mourn, only to run. Now he needed to find his herd again, so he called, but there was no answer. He brayed again. No answer. He brayed once more, and the smoldering forest began to chitter, and it began to rustle, and scuffle, and patter. Ankylosaurus and Triceratops looked at each other, frightened. What had he done? But as they traded glances, Ankylosaurus began to shuffle and stamp, eyes wide, waving his tail defensively in the air. He splashed through the water, running to shore, braying. Triceratops turned to see ripples of water headed right towards her. Something submerged in the shallows, black eyes and head ridges of an alligatoid skimming the surface. She jumped with a start, bolting for shore. Behind her, the wide jaw of a Brachiochampus opened, its razor-sharp teeth glistening, tail thrashing. The smoldering forest grew louder with chittering and trills. Ankylosaurus now backing away up the shoreline, terrified of the things coming from both directions. Triceratops made it to shore, tearing after Ankylosaurus in full gallop just as the Brachiochampus made landfall, its jaws snapping shut. Triceratops spun, pressing her mass against Ankylosaurus, standing side by side, her head down, his tail up. Brachiochampus stopped, staring at them, wondering if they were worth the fight. He stamped a little, flicking his tail menacingly, sizing up their moxie. Alone, it was an even fight. Maybe he would eat, maybe he would have a skull crushed. Against them together, he wouldn't make it, and these two were standing together. Ankylosaurus smashed his giant bone club of a tail into the sand twice, positioning himself a bit closer to the Brachiochampus, nudging Triceratops slightly behind him. The message was clear. He was not going to let anything near Triceratops. Just to find him elsewhere, thought the Brachiochampus. And then, just as he was turning to return to the water, the forest erupted with a pack of a dozen Leptoceratops, screaming loud, hungry calls as they charged the Brachiochampus. The alligatoid thrashed, snapping his powerful jaws at the easy meal. Leptoceratops were, after all, herbivores, small enough that he could swallow one whole without terrible effort. But when a dozen beaks meant for tearing plants set upon snapping at his flesh, he recoiled, immediately overtaken, the pain of each bite surprisingly awful. His beaks dug into his flesh, tearing off small chunks. He snapped his jaw, cleaving one in half, its rancid, sun-baked innards slopping out. Things weren't alive, they tasted dead. He thrashed, casting off as many of them as he could, charging immediately back into the lake, pale blood spilling out into the water from his wounds. But the 11 remaining Laceratops kept on after him, chasing him into the water, refusing to let up, swarming him from all sides. The fight was a violent, thrashing dance, the Brachychampsa clearly losing on all accounts. Triceratops and Ankylosaurus exchanged looks and simultaneously bolted off along the shoreline, headed for the nearest green they could see. They stamped into the damp sand, kicking up a trail as they went, and then behind them the thrashing stopped, and they heard only the rending of flesh and the shrill chitters of the Ceratops. Ceratops didn't eat meat, and they were small compared to Triceratops and Ankylosaurus. They were essentially giant 100-pound lizards with parrot heads. They weren't bold enough to attack anything their own size, let alone have reason to. Something had driven them to it. The whole forest had gone mad and everything in it. This wasn't the way things were supposed to be. Before the firestorm, there were very specific threats. Once you knew what they were, you and your herd would work together, watch and listen for the signs, and you would be safe. But not now. Now it seemed everything was lethal, everything wanted to eat you. The pair made their way into the green on the farthest edge of the lake, digging themselves deep into the brush, hiding as much of themselves as they could. Together they watched the crimson pool spread across the lake across the Laceratops. The things ate, well past what they could possibly do to fill, then without warning stopped all at once. Brachychampsa thrashed to life in the water, tail twitching. Triceratops and Ankylosaurus watched as the thing that was dead came back again. And all of a sudden everything became much, much scarier. Triceratops and Ankylosaurus stared at each other, jaws unhinged in surprise. If they died, they too would continue to walk, they might hunger for flesh, they too would be predators. The spirits that had come from the sky hadn't brought only death with them, they'd brought the end of all things. The two turned together and pawed as silently as they could through the brush, hoping that the Brachychampsa and the Laceratops pack had forgotten about them. Deadly though these things might be, they didn't seem exceptionally bright. Perhaps they only reacted to stimuli and didn't otherwise think at all. Triceratops was frightened, but felt safer with the Ankylosaurus by her side. She had never spent much time around one before, but found their behavior, particularly the behavior of this Ankylosaurus, to be remarkably familiar. She felt like a member of her own herd, like they had been keeping each other safe for years rather than hours. They trudged through the forest together, looking for food, looking for a place to hole up for the night. Occasionally Ankylosaurus would bray, calling out to his herd, each time Triceratops giving him a pained, keep quiet look. He was terrified of the things lurking out there, and he clearly hadn't learned his lesson. That time they'd been lucky. Next time, maybe not so much. Twigs snapped in the distance and both stopped. There was a patter of feet, padding through the muddy woods, stepping on branches, rustling through greenery. This day, it seemed, was not going to let up, was not going to let them have a moment of rest. It came from all sides. Whatever this was, it was coordinated. They were being surrounded. Triceratops peered deep into the forest, trying to make out what was lurking just out of sight. She listened close for the sounds. Whatever they were running. Patter of their feet, much faster than the larger cyclean beasts. But they weren't small. No, these were decent-sized hunters. Dactyloraptors, pack hunters, on their own, manageable threat. Together, murderous doubles with hooks for feet that could strip a large sauroid in an hour. They were smaller than Triceratops and had less mass than Ankylosaurus, but that could be made up in numbers of 3 or 4. Triceratops knew this could get really, really bad really, really quick. Triceratops spun around, pressing her side against her companion to cover the flank. Ankylosaurus swung his tail high above them, signaling he was ready to smash anything that got close. As he swayed, tail flicking, stamped her front foot, horns pointed dead ahead, hind legs crouched and ready to charge. A Dactyloraptor slunk around from behind a tree, mostly feathers and beak, its large brown feathery plume of tail sticking out almost 3 times as long as it was tall. Its eyes scanned the two as its head swung back and forth, snake-like, cunning. It clearly didn't know what to make of the mismatched pair, but it also wasn't scared enough to call the whole thing off. It pranced, its 8 terrible razor-sharp claws digging into the earth, trying to distract them. Neither of them was buying it. They knew there were several others out in the forest waiting, ready to dive in and tear them apart. The Dactyloraptor put its tail back, fluffing it up to make it look bigger. And then it screeched a blood-curdling call, sounding the attack. 4 other Dactyloraptors rushed out of the foliage at once, feathers fanned out, slack jaws of dagger teeth wide open to tear the prey apart. Triceratops reacted, charging full speed at the nearest raptor. Her horn tore through it like teeth through a leaf, puncturing right through its white-feathered chest, her momentum picking it up off the ground and carrying it 30 meters or so. She slowed down, whipping her head to slam the raptor into the thick tree, scraping the corpse from her horn, letting the bloody feathered lump fall limp to the ground. 2 raptors descended straight upon Ankylosaurus, the first smashed instantly to bloody broken pulp from above by a single swing of his tail, the second getting in close enough to clamp its fangs down on one of its rock-hard armor plates. Triceratops wheeled around to charge the one biting Ankylosaurus. She brayed, loud and angry, sounding the charge. The raptor looked up from its failed bite just as she took the first steps. Ankylosaurus swung around, batting him to the side. He looked up, saw Triceratops barreling toward him, and hopped quickly out of the way. The raptor scrambled to its feet, managed to evade the horns but not the charge. Triceratops' considerable bulk trampled him into the mud, shattering bones, crushing his spine. The other 2 raptors stopped mid-charge, suddenly finding their numbers even, but the odds far from it. Ankylosaurus lashed his tail back and forth angrily into the earth. Triceratops spun around, taking her place beside him, once more rearing back to charge. On the ground, the trampled raptor whimpered, crying for help, its spine shattered, body bent in half. The other 2 raptors looked careful steps backward, and then the forest cowered beneath the tumultuous roar of hell. Everything stopped. Everyone listened. No one dared move a muscle. The thunk, 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 thunk of Tyrannosaurus Rex, slowly stomping its way through the woods, seemed to come from everywhere at once, but the rhythm of its step was somehow off. This wasn't a towering predator looking for lunch. It was one of them. One of the dead. Triceratops pissed uncontrollably. She recognized the footfalls. She'd seen this thing before. Even before it emerged to the trees, she knew who and what it was. One Eye was back. The shambling mess of a beast knocked over trees and trampled bushes, the deep blood red of its scaly skin flashing through the green foliage. Dactyloraptors backed warily towards Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, forgetting that just a moment before they were trying to make a meal out of these 2. There was safety in numbers, and all things were dinner to a T-Rex. So terrified was everyone that even Triceratops and Ankylosaurus had forgotten their enmity by the time the 4 had clustered together in a tight group. The beast surveyed the scene with its one good eye, and slowly shambled over to the mewling, injured raptor. It lowered its monstrous head and snapped up the broken thing in a single bite, swallowing it whole. The T-Rex then turned its attention back to the 4 remaining creatures. The raptors exchanging glances with each other before trading looks with Triceratops and Ankylosaurus. None of them were quite sure what to do. Then the lead raptor plumed out its feathers and squawked, stamping its clawed feet in the mud. The other raptor responded by running off, coming around on the other side of the T-Rex. The leader looked back at Triceratops and nodded, hoping she understood. She did. The other raptor charged One Eye from behind, letting out a long, aggressive squeal. One Eye turned, lumbering around just as the raptor immediately juked, veering off into the bushes. Then the lead raptor advanced, squawking, digging chunks of earth out of the ground with its taloned feet in a bizarre, distracting dance. Again, One Eye trundled around, tipping slightly off balance. Triceratops saw her opening and charged with all her might. One Eye looked down, jaw widening for a bite. It was one moment too late. Triceratops' horns tore through rancid flesh, the blow toppling the monster over onto its side. her momentum carrying her well past them into the forest. Both raptors leapt immediately atop, digging their prestigious talons into its flesh. One Eye bucked, knocking the two Dactyloraptors onto their backs. Triceratops continued in a semicircle around a tight cluster of trees, trying to find a path back to the Tyrannosaur. Ankylosaurus advanced, thwacking his tail. One Eye staggered to his feet, unaware of the half-dozen fresh gases in its side. Ankylosaurus smashed his tail into its side, knocking it over once more, shattering its ribcage and spraying decayed meat everywhere. The beast howled, but not in pain. It was oblivious to the pain, already rising to its feet again. The raptors danced around it in a circle, raising a ruckus, trying to keep it distracted from the two larger, more powerful dinosaurs. One Eye lurched forward. One of the raptors charged him, then danced back. The Tyrannosaur lunged, missing. The raptor rushed forward again, letting out a ka-ka-ka-ka as she did, and once again One Eye snapped at her, missing. Then the raptor charged a third time. One Eye's jaws snapped shut right on cue, cutting the raptor in two at the waist. The T-Rex threw its head back to swallow the top half of the raptor, while the other half still twitched and danced nervously, blood spurting. The lead raptor, now alone and outnumbered on all fronts, sprinted off into the woods, leaving Triceratops and Ankylosaurus to fend for themselves. Triceratops charged. Ankylosaurus swung his club. One Eye lurched forward, snapping at Ankylosaurus. The club knocked One Eye's legs out from under him the moment Triceratops slammed into him. The Tyrannosaur toppled to the ground with a tremendous thud, but as it did, it craned its neck forward, biting down on Ankylosaurus, its dagger-like fangs piercing through his armored hide. Ankylosaurus let out a terrible bray, the pain of the bite causing him to seize up and jerk away. One Eye, however, would not let go of its prize, and tore away what flesh remained, holding Ankylosaurus' side together. Triceratops lowered her head, charged, screaming. Her horns shattered One Eye's skull and shot through to the other side, piercing his one good eye, cleaving his head from his neck. One Eye was dead, for good this time. Crumpled nearby in a pile of leaves, Ankylosaurus brayed in pain. He was bleeding out, in too much agony to move. His tail twitched, tears welling up in his eyes. Triceratops slid One Eye's head from her horns and trotted over to her friend's side. She nuzzled her head, he nuzzled hers back weakly, and made a soft, affectionate bray. Triceratops tried to nudge him to his feet, but he was growing weaker by the moment. He was going to be alone again. Suddenly the forest came alive with the sound of chittering. Triceratops looked up, recognizing it instantly. The Ceratops had followed them from the lake. She turned around, placing herself between Ankylosaurus and the approaching horde of diminutive monsters. She wasn't going to leave Ankylosaurus alone. She wasn't going to allow him to die that way. No, this was where she was going to make her last stand. Foot patted the ground, sounding her charge. She lowered her head, waiting for them to come into view. The horse crunched, it snapped, chittered with angry life. Triceratops took a deep breath. Then the earth rumbled like thunder, trembling, shaking loose like the whole world was coming apart at the seams. It was as if the earth had been struck again by the spirits in the sky. The Ceratops cleared the distant foliage, only to be met by a charging herd of Ankylosaurus. Tails thwacked and whacked and wailed into the ground, smashing some of the Ceratops to bits in single swings, while sending others deep into the woods. The chittering stopped, replaced by the screams of sudden death. The undead Brachiochampsa emerged from a bush, his teeth snapping at nearby Ankylosaurus, three tails crashing down on it in a quick succession, pulping it almost as quickly as it had appeared. Triceratops let out her breath. It had all happened so quickly. She raised her head a little, suspicious of the Ankylosauruses, unsure if they were alive or dead. The lead bull wheeled around, approaching her, tail high in the air. Triceratops backed up, placing herself squarely between Ankylosaurus and the herd. The new bull stepped around her, checking on Ankylosaurus. He knew what that meant and turned, nudging him once more. He nudged him again. He wouldn't wake up. The bull approached, nudged with his own nose, and he looked down at the wound, smelling. His head jerked back, nostrils flared. In a flash, his tail came down, crushing Ankylosaurus' skull. He wasn't going to let him come back as one of those things. Then he nuzzled Ankylosaurus with the top of his head before walking past, allowing another to take his place. One by one, each Ankylosaurus walked up to their fallen cousin, nudging his belly with the top of their heads, mourning silently, and walking slowly away, a great sadness in their eyes. The procession moved quickly, and as the last one paid its respects, the herd soundlessly plodded off into the forest. Then they stopped. One by one, they turned, and each Ankylosaurus gazed back upon Triceratops, waiting to see if she would follow. He knew what that meant. Triceratops had found a new herd. She snorted, stamped a foot in the dirt, and she trotted up alongside them, joining the herd on their long trek across what remained of the valley in hopes of finding a safe place to sleep for the night. Despite how bizarre her world had become, for the first time in days, Triceratops felt at home. And that wraps up Hell Creek. What a wild, heartbreaking journey through a dinosaur zombie apocalypse that hits harder than you might expect. Cargill really nails the mix of brutal survival and quiet emotion here. If you enjoyed that, drop a like, subscribe for more spooky reads on SL tonight, and let me know in the comments, would you team up with a Triceratops or an Ankylosaurus in the end times? Thanks for joining me, Felix Lubezki. Stay tuned for more nightmares. And wish list, Knockout 2, Wrath of the Karens by Exceptional Games. Exceptional Games. Gotta make that clear. Sweet dreams, and have a good night.
When you find that your mind keeps you worried and blue, you can throw your troubles away. If you'll take this advice, it'll bring you back to life. Just try it and you'll say